I tell this story from a place I'd never imagined I'd be. It is 5 a.m. It is still darkish outside. That deep blue that comes before the morning light, just when the night is about to usher in the dawn. In here, the air feels cold, heavy, carrying the smell of concrete, metal, and old disinfectant. Everything feels paused, like the world is holding in its breath. The cells are quiet, but not silent. You can hear sounds from afar. Imam coughing, someone turning slowly on a thin mattress, chains or keys clinking faintly as a guard walks past. The low hum of fluorescent lights that never fully turn off. Footsteps echo down long corridors, slowly, steady, and unhurried. The sound bounces off the walls and comes back slightly delayed, reminding everyone how small their space is. A guard clears his throat, a radio crackles once, then goes quiet. From some cells you can hear whispers of prayer. From others, deep sighs. A few men sit upright on their beds, already awake, staring at the wall, thinking about families, mistakes, or the day ahead. Others cling to sleep because it's the only place that still feels free. The bars are cold to the touch. The floor is even colder. If there's a window, it is small and high, letting in just a thin line of pale light that slowly grows stronger. Dust floats in the light, moving gently, like time itself is moving slowly. Outside, if you listen carefully, you might hear a distant rooster or even traffic sounds of a normal world continuing without you. That's often the hardest part. But well, life has to go on. At 5 a.m. in the prison, there are no chaos. All we do is wait. Wait for breakfast, wait for head count, wait for the day, wait for a second chance. 5 a.m. is usually a quiet hour, full of regret, reflection, and for some, the first honest thoughts they've had in a long time. My name is James, and this is my story. I was born in the slums, tin roofs stitched together by rust and hope, muddy paths that swallowed our feet and left us laughing as we pulled each other free from sticky mud. Some nights when hunger didn't cry out, it just sat quietly in the corner of the room, waiting, patient, and familiar. But if you think we were miserable, you'd be wrong. We were 6. My father, my mother, and us. 4 children. Close like fingers on the same hand, but different in shape, but strongest when we held together. Our home was small, but it was never empty. If you stood outside, you'd hear it, laughter spilling through the thin walls, voices overlapping, life happening loudly in a place that had every reason to be silent. We played games with nothing. Bottle caps became cars, sticks became swords. The ground was our playground, and our imagination filled in everything poverty took away. When one of us fell, someone else was always there to pull them up. Sometimes laughing, sometimes brushing dust from scraped knees. When food was little, my mother would smile and say, "It's slowly, so it lasts longer." And we would laugh, not because we weren't hungry, but because her voice made hunger feel less powerful. She made miracles out of small meals. She made warmth out of almost nothing. At night, we slept close, sometimes 3 of us on one mattress, legs tangled, breaths rising and falling together. If one child cried, a hand would reach out in the dark. Comfort didn't need words in that house. It was understood. My father was tired in ways I didn't understand then. His hands were rough. His clothes smelled of dust and work. But every evening, no matter how heavy the day had been, he asked about school like it mattered more than anything else. He laughed at our silly stories. He teased us until we forgot how hard life could be. Sometimes he told stories, not from books but from memory. Stories that didn't always have endings but always had lessons. When he spoke, we listened. When he laughed, the whole room felt safe. Sunday was a day very special to us. I remember us wearing clean clothes, even if they were old and faded, faces washed, hair neatly done. We walked to church together hand in hand, singing songs about hope and faith. We prayed. We believed tomorrow could be kinder than today. That house taught me love before it taught me fear. It taught me belonging before the world taught me pressure. It taught me that happiness isn't built from money, but from presence, from people who show up even when they have nothing left to give. In that home, I was protected. I was known. I was deeply, genuinely happy. I would wake up early for school, uniform ironed as best as my mother could manage, books clutched tight because education felt like my escape. I remember the morning sun spilling onto the dusty roads as I clutched my worn school books, my uniform wrinkled but as neat as my mother could manage. Each day felt like stepping into a small miracle, because school was more than just lessons. It was my way out, my hope, my promise to myself and to my family. From the first day, my teachers made it clear. Education is the key, James. Work hard now, and doors will open that poverty cannot close. Their words sank into me like seeds, and I nurtured them with every test, every assignment, every extra page I read at night was by flickering candlelight. I didn't just want good grades. I wanted to change everything. I wanted to lift my parents from the tin-roofed house that rattled when the rain fell to a home where my siblings wouldn't wake up to hunger pangs. I wanted to see my mother's face light up when she could buy groceries without counting coins, and my father smiling without worry in his tired eyes. And I had a dream burning bright inside me. I wanted to be an engineer, to design roads, to design buildings, maybe even bridges. Structures that could stand strong in storms, stronger than the slum that raised me. Every geometry problem, every physics experiment, every blueprint we drew in class felt like another step towards the dream. I was good at it too. Teachers praised my focus and curiosity. My parents beamed with pride. My siblings followed me, eyes wide with admiration, hanging on every word I spoke about machines, structures, and calculations. In their eyes, I was already building a bridge, not just of concrete and steel, but of hope, from the slums to a life where we didn't have to scrap to survive. I thought if I worked hard enough, if I stayed true to my dreams, nothing could touch me. At first, it was almost invisible. The cracks. The neighborhood's older boy would laugh at me on the streets. "Always with your books, James. Don't you want to have some fun? I would smile politely and turn away, clutching my notes like a shield, but the words lingered. Then came invitations I didn't know how to refuse. Just once. Come with us. At first, it was small things. Hanging out after school, skipping homework once in a while, joking with boys who walked with a swagger I envied. They had money, I didn't. Snacks I could barely afford, and a confidence I longed to borrow. I told myself it was harmless. I was still studying. I was still the boy who loved school, who dreamed of building a future. But slowly, I noticed I wasn't paying attention as much. Geometry felt boring. Physics felt pointless. I created bridges in the margins of my notebook instead of solving the problems. Teachers frowned, but I waved it off. I'm just tired, I said, and I meant it, sort of. The first time someone offered me drugs, I said no, twice. But each no was met with laughter, mockery, and a challenge that burned in my pride. Everyone does it, don't be weak. I didn't want to be weak. I didn't want to be laughed at. And that's when I realized being smart, being good, being the dreamer my parents admired, it suddenly felt heavy. Like a weight that set me apart from the boys I wanted to belong with. I wanted their acceptance, their respect, and for the first time, I felt like my books and grades weren't enough. The cracks had appeared, tiny at first, but almost visible. But they were growing, and I didn't know it yet, but they were big enough to swallow the boy who wanted to save his family. It started small, almost like a dare. One afternoon, after school, they cornered me near the dusty alley behind the market. The older boys laughed, passing something back and forth. Just once, James. You'll see it's nothing. I hesitated. I remembered my mother's tired smile when I brought home a good report card. I remembered my father's voice full of pride asking about my lessons. I remembered the bridges I had drawn in the margins of my notebook, the dreams I held tightly like treasures. But the laughter, the need to belong, keep on playing me. I told myself it will be just once, and I'd be back to my books, back to the boy I wanted to be. And that just once was the first step over a line I didn't even realize was there. At first, nothing seemed wrong. The world didn't collapse. I still went to school, still smiled at my parents. But slowly, the books grew heavier, the homework more tedious, and the joy in the learning began to fade. The older boys welcomed me, laughing, teasing, patting my back. I felt alive in a way I didn't in months. Belonging felt sweeter than success. I told myself I could handle it. I was still James, the boy with a dream. I just wanted a little escape. And that's when the real danger began. The lines between escape and habit started to blur. Every choice that seemed small at first became a shadow that stretched longer across my schoolwork, my family and future. At first, the drugs felt like a magic key. I remember the first few times, the initial rush that silenced the worries of the slum. The hunger in my stomach faded, replaced by a dizzying euphoria. Arguments with my parents, the constant sting of poverty, the feeling of being trapped. All of it dissolved in a beautiful temporary haze. In those early days, I could still manage to sneak a wash, scrub my teeth quickly, and make sure my clothes weren't too dirty before rejoining my family. I felt I was in control, that he could dip into the escape whenever I needed it, and then pull myself back out of it, clean and refreshed. I truly believed it was a secret world I could visit and live without consequences. But the visits became longer and returns harder. The magic started to demand more of me. I needed more of the drugs to feel that initial relief, that powerful quiet. The euphoria became fleeting, often replaced by a jittery anxiety, a gnawing craving that burrowed deep into my bones. I started skipping meals, not because I wasn't hungry, but because the drugs were more important and more urgent. I became weak and feeble, and the simple act of fetching water or helping my mother felt like climbing a mountain. The gradual neglect of my personal hygiene started subtly. At first, it was just missing a day's wash. Too tired, I would tell myself. I'll do it tomorrow. Tomorrow turned into the other day after, and then a week. The effort it took to even think about soap and water felt monumental compared to the immediate, desperate need for the drug. My clothes, once carefully chosen and worn, became a second skin of dirt and stale sweat. I no longer noticed the smell, or if I did, I would ignore. Who cares anyway? I'd think. My self-worth eroded with each missed shower. Months bled into a year. I became a shadow of my former self. My body, once lean and strong from playing in the dusty streets, was now numbed, almost skeletal. My skin, once smooth and healthy, was often broken out in sores from scratching or simply dull and lifeless. My teeth, which my mother had always urged me to clean, were now stained and brittle, a constant source of throbbing pain I tried to ignore. The bright, hopeful spark in my eyes had been extinguished, replaced by a haunted, distant look. My personal hygiene became non-existent. My hair was greasy, my fingernails chipped and black with dirt. The familiar scent of my family's home was replaced by a crude smell of unwashed clothes and unbathed skin clinging to me. I avoided mirrors, unable to face the stranger staring back. The boy who wanted to build bridges to lift his family out of the slums was still there, but he was already fighting to be seen through the fog of temptation. Homework sat untouched while I wandered the streets with the older boys. The notebooks I once clenched like treasure collected dust. Teachers frowned at my empty pages, but I barely noticed anymore. At home, the change was even harder to hide. My mother's eyes, usually full of pride, clouded with worry. "James, you are different," she said one evening, trying to catch my gaze. But I had begun to avoid them, avoiding the truth I didn't want to face. Stealing began as almost a joke. Coins from pockets, small things that wouldn't be missed. But the weight of need, the craving that had begun as curiosity, grew. One afternoon, I saw my mother counting the few coins we had left for food. My heart twisted in a way I couldn't bear to acknowledge. It happened on a Friday afternoon. I thought I was careful, but I wasn't. A neighbor spotted me, slipping a few coins into my pocket, and shouted. Within minutes, a small crowd gathered. Faces I had known all my life were twisted in anger and disappointment. Whispers of betrayal and shame followed me home like shadows. My mother met me at the door first. Her eyes were wide with fear, and the moment she realized what had happened, she sank to the floor, trembling. "James, why?" she whispered, her voice breaking. The words struck me harder than any punishment ever could. My father didn't shout at first. He just looked at me, and the silence was heavier than any words. "You're better than this," he finally said, voice tight with both rage and heartbreak. "You promised me, James. You promised your mother. What happened to the boy you wanted to build a future?" The little trust that had always tied us together felt like it had snapped. I could see it in their eyes. Fear, disappointment, and a hurt I had no right to inflict. The elders in the neighborhood spoke too, their voices low but sharp. I heard words like lost, shame, nothing left for him. That night, alone in my room, I stared at the cracked ceiling. The coins I had stolen lay on the floor, useless, mocking me. The laughter of the older boys from the streets outside sounded hollow now, replaced by the echo of my mother's tears. I felt a new kind of fear then. Not the fear of getting caught, not the fear of punishment, but the fear of losing myself completely. I realized for the first time that I wasn't just breaking rules. I was breaking hearts, my own included. And yet, even in that fear, I didn't know how to stop. The day I was taken to rehabilitation felt surreal. I sat on a narrow bench in a small white-walled room, trying to imagine that this place could fix what I had broken. The counselors spoke of hope, of second chances, of starting over. They used words like, "You can change, James." And I nodded politely, letting the words wash over me. At first I tried. I went to classes, followed the schedules, listened to the others' stories, and even wrote letters to my parents. I wanted to be the boy I had been, the boy who dreamed of engineering bridges and lifting my family out of the slums. But the cravings, they never left. They lingered at the edges of my mind, whispering that freedom was a lie and that the world outside was waiting for me. It was only a matter of time. The first relapse was quiet, almost unnoticed. A small taste, a moment of weakness, and suddenly the counselor's words felt distant and hope fragile. I told myself I'd start over tomorrow, and tomorrow I relapsed again. When I finally walked out of the rehab, I wasn't the boy who had entered. I was hollow in a way I didn't recognize. The streets called me back, and this time they welcomed me with open arms. Older boys, the ones I had envied before, now had a place for me. They laughed like nothing scared them, moved through the neighborhood with a sense of power I had never felt in school. I wanted that power, that respect, that belonging. And so, slowly, I let go of the boy who dreamed of bridges and books. I joined them. We stole, we intimidated, we carved fear into the very streets that had once been my playground. At first, it felt thrilling. I was alive in a way I hadn't been since my first taste of freedom outside my textbooks. But the fear was never far behind the fear of getting caught, the fear of betrayal, the fear that every step I took away from my dreams was permanent. Then came the arrest, handcuffs, a cell, silence. For the first time in years, I had nothing to run to. nothing to hide behind. And in that silence, I finally saw him, the boy who loved school, who dreamed of building a future, who wanted to lift his family out of the slums. I had abandoned him. And now, speaking from a small, empty cell, which has been my home for the past 1 year, I understand that change isn't about one choice, one moment. It is about every decision, every promise you make to yourself, every bridge you either build or burn. I can't undo the past. I can only hope to rebuild what's left. The cell is quiet now, the kind of quiet that presses in from every corner. The early morning light streams through the small barred windows, cutting thin lines across the concrete floor. I sit on the narrow bed, hands clasped, staring at the wall. The silence isn't empty. It's full of memories, full of things I can't take back. I think of my mother, her tired smile, the warmth of her hand on mine. I also think of my father, proud and strong, now quiet in his disappointment. I think of my siblings, following me through the dusty streets, seeing in me someone who could lift them out of that life. I think of school. I think of books I once treasured, of the dreams I held tight like lifelines. I think of the boy I used to be, the one who wanted to be an engineer, who believed in bridges and bright futures. And I think of the choices I made, the bridges I burned, and the hearts I broke. The cell is small, but it gives me space to see clearly. I see that hope doesn't vanish even in the darkest places. I see that change is possible, even if it is slow or painful. I see that I can't undo the past, but I can choose my next step carefully. I close my eyes and make a promise, not to anyone, but myself, to try, truly try, to rebuild, to study again, to think again, to be the James who lifts, not destroys. The world outside the bars continues without me. The streets I walked, the friends I lost, the neighborhood that raised me, they are still there. But now I know I can either be a part of the distraction or I can be part of something better. And for the first time in a long while, I believe that boy inside me, the dreamer, can still be found. It's not too late. I can still be better.